The night sky over Sumy was supposed to be quiet. Instead, it erupted in fire. At 2:17 a.m., a Russian convoy carrying one of Moscow's most decorated generals raced through the darkness, believing the road ahead was safe. They were wrong. From miles away, a Ukrainian drone locked on, its operator whispering coordinates into the headset. In seconds, the target would be in range, and when the strike hit, it didn't just destroy a vehicle, it shattered Russia's entire summer offensive. But what Ukraine uncovered next on that same highway would send shockwaves all the way to the Kremlin. The night Ukraine struck was supposed to be just another step in Russia's carefully orchestrated summer offensive. Weeks earlier, Moscow had celebrated its push into Kursk as a sign of regained momentum. Propaganda outlets boasted of stabilizing the northern front, while high-ranking officials promised that Sumy would fall within weeks. Inside the Kremlin, the plan sounded simple: secure Sumy, create a buffer zone, and prevent Ukraine from ever threatening Russian soil again. They believed the path forward was clear. Russian forces poured men and equipment toward the border, confident that Ukraine's defenses were fractured beyond repair. But confidence can be deadly. What Moscow didn't see were the signs of a tightening noose. Ukrainian drones had begun probing the skies above Sumy. Supply routes were already under surveillance, and far from retreating, Ukraine's defenders were preparing for something Russia never expected: a counterstrike designed not to hold the line, but to rip Russia's offensive apart piece by piece. Still, the Russians pressed on, and at the heart of this operation was a single man, Lieutenant General Esedulla Abachev, a veteran commander with orders to bring Sumy to its knees. His arrival was supposed to turn chaos into control. But even as his convoy left Kursk, the ground beneath Russia's summer offensive was starting to crack, and in a few days, it would collapse entirely. While Russia celebrated its early gains, deep inside Sumy's countryside, a different kind of war was taking shape. Ukraine wasn't broadcasting its movements. It wasn't showing flashy counteroffensives on television. Instead, it worked in silence. In abandoned barns, under tree canopies, and within reinforced basements, special operations units prepared. Every night, small teams moved through the fields with infrared optics and encrypted radios, mapping every Russian supply line, every checkpoint, every weak point. They called themselves UA-Reg, a shadow unit tasked with one mission: disrupt Russia's northern advance by any means necessary. Their patience was brutal. For weeks they watched convoys come and go. They memorized patterns, pinpointed which roads carried reinforcements and which were vulnerable to ambush. And when they noticed a strange development in mid-August, a surge of encrypted Russian traffic between Kursk and Sumy, they knew something big was coming. But what? That answer came when intelligence intercepted a single, high-value name: Lieutenant General Esedulla Abachev, the architect of Russia's brutality in Luhansk, the man credited with breaking Ukraine's defenses in the east. Now, he was coming to Sumy. To the UAREG team, this wasn't just an opportunity, it was a gift, and they were going to take it, because once Abachev crossed the border, they would be waiting. Russia's advance into Sumy depended on speed. Supplies, reinforcements, and armored columns needed to move unimpeded across a handful of key routes. At the center of this fragile network was a modest concrete span near the village of Yunikivka, a bridge so unremarkable that Moscow assumed it would be ignored. Ukraine didn't ignore it. On August 1st, under the cover of a moonless night, a Ukrainian MiG-29 fighter jet roared low over the treetops. It carried a single payload, a precision-guided bomb aimed directly at Yunikivka's lifeline. At 2:43 a.m., villagers miles away felt the ground tremble. When the smoke cleared, the bridge was gone, reduced to twisted metal and shattered concrete. The impact on Russia's campaign was immediate and devastating. Without the bridge, armored units couldn't cross the river. Supply trucks were forced onto secondary dirt roads where Ukrainian drones stalked them relentlessly. Units stationed deep inside Sumy suddenly found themselves isolated, their lines of resupply severed. Kremlin planners had no backup plan. Their war machine was now limping, exposed, and increasingly desperate. That's when Moscow decided to send in Abachev, the man they believed could salvage this crumbling offensive. But Ukraine had just turned the battlefield into a trap, and the general was driving straight into it. In Moscow's view, Sumy needed a savior. Russia's frontline commanders were losing control, supply chains were disintegrating, and morale was plummeting. So the Kremlin turned to a man it trusted to impose order through fear and precision: Lieutenant General Esedulla Abachev. Abachev wasn't just another officer. He was a veteran of Chechnya, Georgia, and Syria, a man forged in decades of brutal campaigns. His orders were clear: enter Sumy, reorganize the scattered Russian units, and crush any Ukrainian resistance. The message to his subordinates was simple: failure will not be tolerated. On August 16th, under strict secrecy, his convoy rolled out from Kursk. It was a small formation, 2 armored SUVs and a support vehicle, moving under cover of darkness along the Rilsk-Komatovka highway. Russian intelligence believed the route was secure. After all, they'd pushed Ukraine out of Kursk weeks earlier. What could possibly threaten a high-speed convoy in the dead of night? Plenty. Ukrainian intercept teams had been listening. UA Reg already had Abachev's name, now they had his route. As the general's vehicle sped south, a silent drone launched from a hidden clearing, its electric whine barely audible over the summer crickets. The hunter had just taken off, and Abachev had no idea death was already above him. The convoy pushed through the darkness, headlights dimmed, tires humming over cracked asphalt. Inside the lead vehicle, Abachev reviewed maps under the glow of a dashboard light. Every kilometer brought him closer to Sumy, and closer to disaster. 5 miles away, a Ukrainian Special Operations operator watched a monitor inside a camouflaged command van. On the screen, a thermal image showed 3 white-hot shapes moving along the highway. The target was confirmed. "Engage!" came the whispered order. From a nearby field, the first FPV drone lifted into the air. Its rotors made a sound no louder than a swarm of insects. Guided by a high-gain antenna, it slipped into the night sky, climbing just enough to maintain line of sight, then dropping low to avoid Russian radar. The convoy was unaware. The second vehicle even slowed briefly, its occupants scanning the roadside with night vision scopes, but they saw nothing. Meanwhile, a second drone launched. This one carried the payload, a shaped charge designed to punch through armored plating. It followed behind the first, flying silent and unseen. In the command van, the operator's heart rate ticked upward. The target was approaching a bend in the road, a perfect kill zone. He adjusted the feed, zooming in as Abachev's lead SUV came into view. One more turn, and the general's fate would be sealed. The bend approached. The operator steadied his hands on the controls. Through the drone's camera, Abachev's SUV loomed larger, its military plates glinting faintly under moonlight. This was it. "Execute," came the order. The FPV drone dipped, accelerating to attack speed. Its electric whine rose to a piercing hum as it skimmed just feet above the asphalt, weaving between shadows. Inside the convoy, no one noticed, until it was too late. The lead SUV rounded the curve. The drone locked on. Impact. The night erupted in a fireball. The explosion ripped through steel and flesh, flipping the vehicle onto its side. Shrapnel sprayed across the road, tearing through the second SUV and sending it skidding into a ditch. Chaos followed. Survivors scrambled from the wreckage, some screaming, some firing blindly into the dark. A second Ukrainian drone, already circling overhead, captured everything. The burning convoy, the confusion, the unmistakable sight of a man dragged from the lead vehicle, one arm hanging limp, his legs soaked in blood. It was Abachev. Before the Russians could react, the second drone dove, detonating beside the crippled convoy. Another blast, another shockwave. When the smoke cleared, the road was littered with wreckage, and Russia's most trusted general was broken, barely clinging to life. And Ukraine wasn't finished yet. Minutes after the second blast, the highway was a scene of ruin. Flames licked at twisted metal as ammunition from the wrecked vehicles cooked off in sporadic bursts. Russian survivors stumbled through smoke, dragging the wounded toward the tree line. There was no order, no command, only panic. Abachev lay on the roadside, barely conscious. His right arm was gone, torn away at the shoulder, one leg mangled beyond saving. Medics fought to keep him alive as they radioed frantically for evacuation. Within the hour, a military transport helicopter would whisk him to Moscow, but the damage was permanent. He would never return to the battlefield. News of the strike reached Russian units in Sumy by dawn. What had been a tenuous line of defense disintegrated almost immediately. Platoons abandoned positions, unsure of who was in charge. Supply columns turned back, fearing ambush. By midday, Ukrainian artillery was pounding isolated Russian pockets with devastating accuracy. For Ukraine, the hit was more than just a tactical victory. It was a message, a clear declaration that no one, not even Russia's elite commanders, was beyond their reach. And for Russia, it was a disaster. Because Abachev's fall wasn't just the loss of a general, it was the unraveling of an entire offensive. The strike on Abachev sent shockwaves far beyond the smoldering highway. In Sumy, Russian units found themselves leaderless and exposed. Without Abachev's command, coordination evaporated, orders contradicted each other, supply convoys failed to arrive, and entire battalions were left stranded in hostile territory. Ukrainian forces exploited the chaos with precision. Drone footage showed artillery batteries zeroing in on abandoned Russian positions. Small strike teams ambushed retreating units along back roads, capturing vehicles and prisoners. By August 20th, Ukraine had clawed back several villages near the border, turning what had been Russia's offensive into a grinding retreat. In Moscow, the fallout was severe. State media downplayed the incident, calling Abachev's injuries non-critical, but military insiders leaked the truth. He had lost an arm and a leg, and with him, Russia had lost its last hope of stabilizing Sumy. The Kremlin's response was desperate: more conscripts, more rushed orders, and a growing reliance on sheer numbers rather than strategy. But numbers couldn't fix what had just broken. Sumy had become a symbol of Russian failure, a place where Moscow's might met its limits. And as Ukrainian forces pressed their advantage, one question loomed over the Kremlin. If they couldn't hold Sumy, how long could they hold anything at all? By late August, Sumy was no longer just a battlefield. It was a springboard. Ukrainian forces, emboldened by their success, shifted from holding ground to hunting opportunities. Recon drones scoured the skies daily, identifying Russian ammo dumps, command posts, and retreat corridors. Each target struck sent a ripple of panic through the remaining Russian ranks. The destruction of the Unikivka bridge had done more than isolate enemy units. It had split Russia's northern forces in two. Now Ukraine moved to finish them off. Mechanized brigades advanced through liberated villages, cutting supply lines deeper, while special operations units pushed northward to harass Russian positions near the border itself. Moscow's response was frantic. Freshly mobilized troops arrived, barely trained, some lacking basic equipment. They were thrown into the fight anyway, ordered to hold ground they barely understood. Casualty reports mounted, and whispers began circulating among Russian soldiers. Sumy is a death trap. Western intelligence watched closely. Analysts noted that Ukraine's success here could mark a turning point, a shift from defensive resilience to offensive dominance. For Kyiv, this was proof that even against a larger foe, precision and patience could win wars. And for Russia, it was a nightmare unfolding in real time. Because Sumy wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something far more dangerous. Night falls over Sumy again, but this time, the silence belongs to Ukraine. The highways that once carried Russian convoys now lie in ruins, littered with burnt-out vehicles. Villages that had braced for occupation raised their flags once more. Yet amidst the celebration, there is no illusion. The war is far from over. Inside a hardened bunker outside Sumy, Ukrainian commanders huddle over satellite imagery. Red markers light up across the map. Fuel depots in Kursk, railheads in Belgorod, a command hub deep inside Bryansk. Targets, each one vital to Russia's ability to fight. The next phase is already in motion. Hundreds of miles away, in Moscow, panic seeps through closed doors. Abachev's defeat is a wound that can't be hidden, and the Kremlin's inner circle knows it. Desperation breeds rash decisions, and whispers of a harsher escalation grow louder by the day. For Ukraine, Sumy was a battle won. For Russia, it was a disaster that might spiral into something far worse. The lines of war are shifting, and no one knows where they will settle. Because this isn't over. Tonight, Ukrainian drones take off again, heading deeper, faster, further than before. And somewhere across the border, another high-value target is about to learn what Abachev learned the hard way, that nowhere is safe anymore.